Uh, Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kubernetes SIG Testing biweekly meeting. This meeting is covered by the CNCF Code of Conduct. The very short version of that is be good to each other. This meeting will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube publicly. So first up, we have Chow with proposing continuous deployment for the Kubernetes prow.
I click share screen, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Yeah, Ben, you got to right click on Chow and make him a co-host.
Done. Try now.
Oh, now I'm seeing many more buttons.
Don't kick us all out.
Okay, so hi guys, this is Chow from Google. I believe, yeah, this is my first time presenting here. Nice to meet you guys. So the topic I'm going to discuss today is a proposal to keep on continuous deploying case prow instead of manually deploying every day by prow on call. So the doc is here, the link is here. I already opened it on this side. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Cool.
Yes.
So I will try to be quick because there's really not too much technical difficulty here. It's more like a decision. So basically, the motivation of doing this is because currently there are like 6 steps for on-call to go through manually every working day to deploy a prow image. I mean, a set of new prow images. And this is pretty time consuming, and it has been proven in the past several months that prow is pretty reliable in the sense that, as Alvaro pointed out in the design doc, it's most of the errors were caught by OpenShift prow because they are already doing this continuous deployment of prow. So normally what's going on in the past couple of months was OpenShift first deployed the latest image of prow from head, and they discovered problem. They would halt the bump of prow in case and prevented disaster from propagating further. This is nice, but not necessary. I think the ideal model for prow should be, since it's producing case, it should be continuously deployed, and our monitoring and alerting system should be good enough to capture the errors, so humans don't need to intervene. That's basically the motivation of doing this. And the impact of doing this is it can save on call half an hour every day, which aggregates to 3 hours per week. And what we get is we are going to have more actively updated prow, so we can always get the latest prow, latest prow features and bug fixes in case. What we're gonna lose is probably a little bit of stability because we are not canaryed by OpenShift prow. And the way we're doing this is pretty simple because we already have all of the pieces ready. This proposal is pretty much the same as what OpenShift is doing right now. So basically, we already have a auto bump PR come up every day. And the only thing we need to do is to make Tide blindly trust the bot that create the bump PR. So there's no LGTM approval needed. As long as the PR pass pre-submit tests, it will get merged. And all the other pieces are also ready. Once the PR is merged, everything will propagate and the PR will get auto updated. What we need to be care about is like two things. One is rollback. So the rollback is also pretty easy. We just need to put a hold on the out-of-bump PR. So future out-of-bump will not get merged automatically by Tide. And on-call will go over and manually create a rollback PR and rollback if PRO is badly affected, like it will not propagate the changes from the rollback PR. Then on-call need to go over and manually apply the rollback PR. And if there is another thing we need to be caution is like breaking changes in PRO. So several things we need to care about is, so first of all, we should be disciplined on causing breaking change going into PRO. Like if you submit a PR is going to break PRO right away, that's probably not very acceptable. Or if it's not avoidable, then we should at least inform every possible stakeholder to make sure they're aware of the change so they can manually intervene the auto deployment process. Also, there's a stretch goal is like, as discussed with Cole here. Yeah, also been commented here. Versioning PRO would be ideal, in my opinion, but it's a stretch goal. Like if we have, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I think the like versioning discussion is maybe a little bit of a separate topic, and there's probably actually quite a bit to talk about already with like should we be continuously deploying. One thing I had a comment earlier. I need to scroll back in the doc. So if Tide is auto-merging PRs that bump PRO on 1 hour intervals, how is on-call going to know what a known good version is? Are they just going to roll back like an entire day? Or because one of the things about the current model is that since we don't know when breaking changes are landing and that sort of thing, somebody's bumping once a day. If it breaks, we have an entire day at least of running a previous version, so we know that one's fine and we can roll back. But if we're only doing like maybe 1 hour intervals, are we confident that we're going to know that like the previous hour's PRO was fine?
That's a good question. Actually, I don't have a very good answer, but Alvaro might be able to provide.
Yeah, so in OpenShift, we currently have a 6 hour interval, I believe. And so I can't give a blanket answer on how in the past we found out the last good version, but generally speaking, I think the number of changes in PRO at this point is so little that usually it's pretty easy to figure out what bump touched the area that's now not working anymore.
That makes sense, though. I'd also comment then that if the number of changes is pretty low, the utility of deploying like every hour seems low.
I guess I have a similar comment thinking about right now the auto bump PR also bumps all of the job images. And while this could avoid some confusion we ran into, for example, where people didn't realize that changes to kubetest don't take effect until the next bump PR merges. So like it could cause their changes to go into effect faster, which might be good. But many of the jobs that the Kubernetes community cares about take anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours to run to completion. So in the event that either a job change or a PROW image change caused those things to stop behaving correctly, I feel like it would be harder to track it down. Having a day as a boundary is useful. But so I guess like the compromise I would propose is like the auto merging stuff and kind of keeping at the current cadence, and then identifying like how we can push forward or make more visible like the versions that have changed when. Like I'm thinking like you could have PROW attach a label to the jobs that it's scheduling to say it was created by this version of PROW. And we could augment pod utils and stuff to make sure that like which version of PROW shows up in test grid or stuff like that.
I would also suggest that possibly instead, before doing this, it might make sense to split out the auto bump process between the test images and PROW, and we can hand over control over approving test image changes to the broader SIG testing community and let the PROW on-call group control just the PROW and put those on different update cycles. I think coupling them was just convenient and also came from a time where people worked on PROW and those images like kubekins, which is not very frequent today. It probably makes more sense to just go ahead and set up a totally separate auto update process for the test images.
Awesome. The auto bumper totally supports that today. I just mucked with the auto bumper config. It's really awesome. Thank you to whoever like set that up. It's really flexible. So I totally think we could set up 2 different auto bumper jobs.
That would be awesome to know. I guess that in that case, we don't actually, it's less concerning on auto merging PROW bumps, right?
Well, and it'll make reverting a little bit easier because then we can still just revert like the merge commit for the auto bump.
Yes.
I think
without the images, yes.
I think we may even want to be merging the test image changes faster, as Aaron mentioned, but we should probably like isolate it from PROW to like de-risk the relationship between those cadences.
And to be honest, in my opinion, the test images can be like auto bumped on different cadence, and they actually can be merged 24/7 in my opinion as well.
So while this is all true, I still personally would feel better if we could get some kind of annotation or label on PROW jobs so we knew which version of PROW was responsible for creating them. Before we went straight to an hourly or as quickly as possible cadence. So like, again, I see nothing wrong with like automating this at some kind of slower cadence to start with, and then sort of gradually turning it up, because I just have concerns if we go straight to as fast as possible, it might be too much instability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good to know. I also have a question for the for SIG testing. Who should I include as approvers for this decision?
I think it should be somebody like SIG testing chairs. I kind of feel like somebody from SIG release needs to feel comfortable. Like I think the risk we're expressing about troubleshooting instability and stuff would come from them as well. So
I'd also like to see an explicit approval from someone that is in PROW approvers.
Is or is not?
It is. I don't actually recall who's all currently in that, but I know, like, for example, like Alvaro or Cole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm assuming Alvaro is going to say, yes, do this, because
Yeah, we're doing this. It works pretty well so far. Yeah, I'm totally about it.
Yeah, just procedurally, it'd be good to have that recorded on the like doc or Kep or whatever we go with.
I agree.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Arno, maybe you'd be an appropriate person from SIG release as one of the tech leads.
If you want.
Okay. Well, like if you are uncomfortable with it, go chat amongst your fellow chairs and tech leads. But I feel like you've gotten comfortable enough with some of the mechanics of deploying Prow over in Kate's infra. It would be good to get your opinion, at least.
Okay. Basically, I think we should involve the tech lead from SIG release, like Sash and Dan, and also Carlos.
Okay, if I think of it in terms of like a cap, we typically want to pin it down to a name. So we don't have to decide the name here. I'm just suggesting, like, talk amongst yours. I think comments from all of you are good, but you should choose one person to be designated an approver for this.
Cool.
Sorry, we kind of jumped in the middle of you presenting this, Chao. Did you have any more to say?
No, I'm good. Stop sharing. Thank you.
I guess one other comment I have would be not sure if the Slack reporter supports this level of granularity today, but it would be cool to continue to get pings in testing ops when auto bumps have deployed. That it may, let's see, I don't think it might not be like a link to the, it'd be cool if it was a link to the PR, but I think at least setting up so that like the deploy job post submit posts to testing ops could give people who are already used to checking that Slack channel some visibility into when things have changed. Like, I know ideally, like, we just point them at test grid and say that that's when it happened. But since people already check Slack, I think it would be cool to keep that, but take the manual toil out of that process.
Sounds good. I'll look into that.
Welcome. Thanks a bunch for presenting this. I'm pretty excited by it. Back to you, Ben.
Yeah, I also want to add that I think the versioning discussion is also something worth having. But we have a number of other today. We might want to circle back to that. It also doesn't. I think it has a little bit less thought and comments so far. The rest of the doc is quite detailed. Okay. So next up, let's try something different. So we have just this morning gotten GitHub Discussions enabled. I'm going to start sharing screen for this. Interesting. I am going to start sharing screen once Zoom has permission to share the screen. Or not. Okay. I'd rather not quit and reopen Zoom. Aaron, do you think you can screen share this?
Sure. What do you want me? Just tell me where to go. I'll be your.
I'm going to drop this in the chat, I guess.
Okay.
There's not a whole lot to show. I just wanted to like have it actually in the video while we were talking about it.
Okay. Can you make me co-host so I can share?
Yes. Done.
All the buttons.
Thought I had everything set up on this machine. Actually using a personal machine because we can't run the client on Corp. So fine. So GitHub now has a discussions feature. It's not on by default in repos. It's something you have to enable. They're just starting to roll this out more. But we've been talking about sort of differentiating the meeting for social and triage and that sort of thing versus this like decision making. Right now, in theory, that goes to the mailing list or a CAP or issues and so on. I think we don't get a lot of interaction on the mailing list for various reasons, and not everything needs to go all the way to being a CAP. That's a bit overkill for a lot of stuff, like when we're discussing what should we do about the images on Docker Hub. So we've been talking, or I in particular have been talking to SIG contributor experience about what we can do with this, and also in the SIG chairs and leads monthly meeting. And one of the suggestions we got is to try GitHub Discussions. So we've just requested this repo, Kubernetes /SIG Testing. It went through this morning and I enabled discussions on it. We've got a test discussion here. I believe this has threading, it has comment voting, it has reactions, so you can just like +1 something instead of emailing everyone with your +1. I'm hoping we can give this a shot for things like, do we want to auto bump prow? They're still useful to talk about in the meeting, perhaps, but for anywhere that you want to record a permanent discussion that doesn't rise to the level of being a KEP, I'd like to give this a shot. It's also in contrast to Slack, where we might be doing real-time debugging or something, or hey, can someone take a look at this? This is a good place for something that you want people in all time zones to see, to have a permanent record that you can link to instead of telling people, oh, go scroll back through Slack looking for this, or trying to get everyone on the mailing list. So please take a look at this issue, try it out. We are pretty new to even knowing like what is the full feature set of this tool. We may find that this is actually not great and just decide this is fine, we'll go back to just using the mailing list and Slack and so on. Comments, concerns, questions?
Do you know if it's possible to close a discussion via a pull request like an issue?
Via a pull request, I don't think so. I don't think they close. I think if you have like a tracking bug, you're still going to want to use an issue. But honestly, this is pretty close to like Reddit for GitHub from what I've seen so far.
Is this better than using a Slack channel?
So we have a Slack channel, and the Slack channel is great for real-time discussions. Like say we have a bug happening with our infrastructure right now and we need to figure out what's going on. It's not very friendly for capturing things across time zones or for or anything more permanent than that. You can technically link to things in Slack, and we do actually have history unlocked, but it's not public. So you have to actually join the Slack to see any of it, and it's easy to get lost in all of the ongoing like real-time chatter. So part of the hope here is this is a totally separate repo. If we think this tool works well, you should be able to subscribe to this repo however you prefer to handle GitHub's notifications, email, or so on. And this can just be a place where we're having sort of discussions that are not purely in the moment. Things that might have gone to the mailing list before, I think, is probably the closest one. But it has a couple of features that may make it a little bit more inviting. Everyone with GitHub has access to this, and you kind of by definition do to work in Kubernetes. And it has things like +1ing a comment without notifying everyone, which is often pretty nice.
Okay, thank you.
I think I missed the entry point to get to here. I clicked on the links, but how do you initiate a discussion? And where's the index of them?
So there's a discussions tab in this repo, and you can click new discussion on that tab, sort of the like virtual in-page tabs.
I feel like this is Stack Overflow in GitHub.
A bit.
By having the up vote and down vote.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the interesting features. We'll have to see if this actually works well or not, but I'm hoping we can try it. One of the things we're doing is we're just trying it as our SIG and reporting back. I think there may be one or two other SIGs looking to try this as well. If this sort of thing is good, I believe steering even is looking to kind of recommend more asynchronous communication within SIGs. But so this may be one way that we do it. We don't know yet. We literally just got this morning, and you need to have a repo that you can edit the settings on to even start toying with this. So this is our our sandbox for this. We have their like just SIG testing repo. We'll probably also potentially use this to source some other like SIG docs. But for now, this should just be like a place that we can experiment with how well this works for us.
Who has access to create categories within discussions, etc.?
That's a good question. I don't know yet. With issues, it was a directory in the repo. I'm not sure if that carried over to discussions or if you need to be a repo owner. I didn't get a chance to read through all of that yet.
I'm trying to figure it out on the fly, but I might not have a lot of success.
I think the people with repo admin have to create the topics. It looks like you do that in the UI.
It would be pretty nice to split up the categories to like the different parts, like triage, prow, metrics, etc.
Yeah, I think we'll need to put thought into that. I didn't get a chance to do any of that because I mean, I enabled the discussion feature before this call. The repo was approved like last night / this morning, so we just barely squeaked it in time to bring it up for this meeting. This is definitely not looking to immediately shift anything serious here. Right now, I'd like everybody to take a look, so we would think, get some feedback on like what we can do, like setting up these categories before we maybe try having some useful discussion here. Like the prow auto bump would have been probably a pretty good one to capture here if we don't feel we need a kept for that. But yeah, definitely think it's going to be very much on a trial basis. It's entirely possible that this doesn't actually pan out and that we need to find a different solution. Kubernetes also has a Discuss board, and I think Stack Overflow and some other things. So we have some options to look into, but I think so far they haven't panned out that well for upstream developer discussion. And I think one of the things that may make this one possible to work is it has a little bit lower barrier to entry because it's just your GitHub account. We don't have to convince everyone to go sign up for Discus and have another notification venue.
I'm just messing around. Y'all continue your chatting. Whatever. You tell me when to stop.
This is good though. This is exactly what we're looking for. Go mess around with this. We'll figure it out as we go. Aaron, do you want to move to the SIG testing board and triage?
Sure. Yeah, since I'm here, let me find the board. Do I have it handily linked? I do not. Okay.
You have it in the doc.
Oh, goodness. Why don't I just do that? So yeah, I guess I lump this just under the general, let's try something different to kind of carry forward what we talked about last week, where we want this to be kind of more about optimizing the high bandwidth time that we have here and less about being like broadcasts or whatever. So one way that other SIGs have done that is to sort of set up a specific meeting for issue triage. But I thought it might be handy to try doing that within this meeting. I'm just going to talk about what it might look like. We can do it or we cannot, because I see there are a bunch of other things on the agenda. But basically, I made a SIG testing project board. It looks kind of like this. Basically, Ben and I are kind of manually throwing issues on here if we feel like it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about or what we're doing. Usually that means the issues are going to be milestoned in the current release milestone 121. And it's just issues. It's not pull requests, because if you're doing a pull request, ideally you've linked to it in the issue, and we can actually see that from here, right? See like what pull requests have linked to a given issue. The columns are basically to triage. Hey, somebody added it to the board. Let's figure out if it's something we're actively going to work on. A help wanted column, which has issues that we've applied the help wanted label to and think are good for maybe not like your first contribution to the project, but I think certainly anybody showing up to this meeting could certainly help out with these issues. And I think even your like second or third contribution could probably be closing out or helping with one of these issues. They all have most of them have a priority label assigned. So it's not like we're trying to put up unimportant things here. These are important and would provide real value to us. The backlog, I can't necessarily say that it's sorted, but this would be like, we have agreed that we want to work on this for sure. And so if you are a more knowledgeable contributor, this would be a really great thing to take on. In progress would be somebody's actually taken on the issue and is working it. We could try playing around with using the triage accepted command and try and say that like everything, or we could try using the lifecycle active command and then say that like everything in this column has to be active. I don't want to like impose too much strict process here, but sometimes making things more consistent might lead us to a path of like more automation to automatically populate these columns for us. Blocked, you're stuck, you need help. And then done, it's stuff that we have put on this board and closed out. So the board, if I remember correctly, has its own sorting based on how humans manually drag cards around. So an alternative way to view what's going on is to use a GitHub issue query. You can use the project field or whatever to say whether or not you can query for everything that's in a given project or not in a given project. And then I have this sorted by most recently updated. So we could also sort of like go through and take a look at everything that's kind of been active recently and make sure that we've got the questions answered that we need to, or we could sort it the other way and say like, hey, this stuff that hasn't been updated in a while, but is it still relevant? Does it need to be bumped up in freshness, whatever. So how would you all feel about sort of walking through this and talking about the priorities and stuff, or getting help on these issues, a regular part of our meeting? I sometimes feel like people are adding stuff to the agenda to talk about like a specific item. One way we could sort of save you having to like jump into a Google Doc or whatever is make sure that it's on this board, and then make sure, you know, you could throw it in blocked, for example, if you feel like you're blocked, and we could start with everything that people are blocked on and see if we can unblock you. This project board, like all project boards within, or almost all project boards within the Kubernetes project, any org member can write to, which means you can move issues around, you can add issues to the board, you can take issues off the board. What you can't do is change the columns or rearrange the columns. That is restricted to the SIG testing leads. Thoughts?
Another approach that I've seen used is using this board and then having someone go through beforehand. And we picked someone to go through just before the meeting to time box and pick out some particular issues to look through. We also have a board that we've used in Conformance. I just dropped a link where we use the generation of the tickets to have both the pre-approval for the work that we're doing and discussion. It's a slightly different flow, but we have found the board useful, but not so much for the actual meeting, for preparing for the meeting and having the short list of things we'd like to get our eyes on.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting approach. I do think there's quite a bit of variation in how SIGs do this, but it seems like a potentially valuable use of high bandwidth time. One of the things that I've been trying to think about is how we draw attention to things that might be interesting for people to work on. We do have like the help wanted labels and so on, but I've noticed that other SIGs kind of do a bit more of this in their meetings, bringing up like, looks like we're, you know, missing getting to these issues. Is anyone interested in this, that sort of thing? I'm pretty +1 on going through triage in this meeting, but I think we might need to think a little bit about how much we time box it and whether it happens at the beginning, at the end, and how do we reconcile that with many of the issues that people are adding to the agenda being essentially zeroing on specific ones already.
So how about this? And we can actually like answer this in a discussion, I guess, but just to throw it out here. SIG architecture a while ago sort of set the precedent that like you can't show up to SIG architecture and start talking about a given issue if you haven't tried to talk about it asynchronously first, which for them meant you have to send something to the mailing list. And only then is it appropriate to take up high bandwidth time because it's been proven not to be resolved. So we could say something similar like, hey, start a GitHub discussion about this. Or we could say like, hey, it has to be an issue and it has to be on our board. I legit don't know if discussions can be added to the board. So that is a thing that I will play with. But how do you feel like about sort of putting together some kind of rule like that? And then that way, sort of setting the agenda for the meeting becomes something you do on GitHub instead of having to edit a Google Doc.
I think this is good in several ways. One, the recording of the discussion during the meeting can happen on that targeted asynchronous discussion thread rather than taking notes on the Google Doc.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to have some policy around try to take things asynchronous before raising them to the limited high bandwidth synchronous time we have. speaking of which, since we don't have that rule yet, and we do have a few more things in the agenda, maybe we should move on.
Yeah, sounds good.
It looks like Hippie's up next with some PR create help question. You're muted.
I was looking for the mute. Yeah, I've got an issue there, and I've been looking at it for a while. We have, it's funny enough, part of the auto bump script, which calls a Golang program, which in turn goes around and calls the script, which calls another Golang binary, and tracking it down to just the most small component that I'm looking for to help with the working group Kate's Infra audit scripts. I am unable to get that binary in a standalone way to take the contents of my local, we're not even using, I'm just trying to use it in my local shell to get it to successfully create pull requests. And I worked with Chow for a bit. We debugged, and I've put a few requests out there. But it might be, if anybody has some time to, so you can just try to look at it. We don't have a lot of docs, but I must be doing something wrong. The only error that I get is the JSON isn't valid, which may mean maybe my URLs are wrong or something, but I don't yet have the skill set to get past this. So I'm kind of putting up the please help.
Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone super familiar with this is active in this meeting right now, but we'll definitely try to raise that for follow-up.
Thanks heaps.
Yeah, I'm super interested in helping you out, but I also have many many other things that are taking precedence right now.
Sure.
So yeah, I thought at one time I was able to like just straight up go build the PR creator binary and then use it elsewhere.
I've had pair sessions with 4 other people, and independently they can't get it to work either. They get the same result.
I won't hijack our time anymore.
Is it the building or the invoking it? Because the issue looks like it's invoking.
It may be an argument error. I've tried to look at all the configured jobs and mirror them. I did update the error string so that it was more accurate, but even with updated error codes, that the JSON just not being valid as it's consumed by the library, yeah, it may be a user error, but it's beyond the user's ability to figure it out.
Understandable. Let's do that for async follow-up. We have Claudio with other images mirrored from Docker Hub.
Yeah, hi. This was brought up to me as well, like 1 hour ago or something like that. Apparently someone hit Docker Hub rate limit building some images. And in this particular scenario, the pause image. And we are basically using Docker Hub image to compile some binaries which we need for Windows. So the question that I was asked is, how do we also mirror those images to the case GCR IO? Or if should we?
Yeah,
basically.
so pause seems like something that I would expect to wind up in Kubernetes adjacent to the existing pause image and be hosted also alongside it. For the build images, those are usually, the sources are in Kubernetes/release now for the base images that we use for these things. And they are built and published to GCR with the cloud build and so on. Is it possible is this an image that we own the sources to and we can do something like that? Or is this an image that we're consuming from a third party?
We are consuming for a third party, something like Windows Cross or something like that. It's basically a compiler.
I think it could still maybe make sense to have an image in the Kubernetes release build images and just have that be like from that image, push it. just so we can avoid rate limiting. We are trying to make sure that the things we depend on in CI we know are not going to be rate limited, which hasn't been a drastic problem for upstream, I think, but I know it's been problematic for various downstreams trying to mirror what we're testing in particular. I think upstream CI has less of an issue with like each node having an IP and not pulling as many things directly, but it seems to be a pretty frequent problem with some of our downstreams as well. And since we have the GCR.io, I think it's worthwhile to remove that pain.
That makes sense. Thanks.
It's also been good. One other issue that I've found that's been helpful from us moving this is we also get the benefit of, even if we're using a tag, we can trust the tag. We don't have to worry about someone pushing a like nasty replacement image because we know that's controlled by the image promotion process and we don't have mutable tags. Whereas when we've been consuming images directly from Docker Hub and our builds and so on, we've wound up with things like, oh, we're going to like register Chemu multi-arch, but we're just pulling a floating tag that someone could push over. From a build provenance perspective, even if we're going to use third party, it kind of makes sense to make sure that we get in a place where we can pin it easily. And putting things in the GCR also helps us with that because of the image promoter.
Sounds good. Then I can follow up on this and implement this further. Thanks.
Yeah, that sounds good. Why aren't any of our other Windows-based images running into this problem? And is this a CI job? Or
oh no, someone building their own images ran into this. They had they were running on in a shared cloud or something, and most other clients or tenants were basically pulling images from Docker Hub. So collectively, they all hit the rate limit, basically.
Okay, that makes sense. But I guess, can you help me understand, like, we do build a bunch of other Windows-based images. How have we not hit this before? Or sorry, like, is this specific to POS, or is this something that's that's affecting all of our Windows images?
I doubt it's Windows specific. It's just that we require some binaries to be built for the Windows image, for the POS image. Sorry, but for the image builder itself, we don't really run that often. I think we run just a couple of jobs the entire week. Okay. So it's not a common problem.
Yeah. Yep, I totally agree with Ben's take that this is a release engineering thing, and yeah.
Yeah, and we avoid this because POS in Kubernetes is not frequently built, and I think the same for most of the other ones. Like the images that actually need to do this stuff tend to be like base images that aren't built as frequently. I don't think we have any Docker Hub dependencies for like core images. They're at least indirect through GCR like we might do here. Except actually a conformance image, which we need to fix. Okay, well, we have just a couple minutes left. I see we have one more topic. Arnaud, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, just basically a while ago, I think in April of last year, Aaron opened an issue about migrate pro.case.io to the community infra. We are looking to run Pro in the community cluster A. So I started to set up a staging instance for Pro, but when I think Aaron made a comment about we can run to Pro instance against the same build cluster. So basically, I'm looking for basic guidance or inputs from tech lead from SIG testing about how we can basically have a transition plan, or how we can basically having a staging instance running against the build cluster.
I think to get a staging instance, we're probably just going to want to stand up parallel of anything that we'd want to use to test this, like the build clusters, and not touch the ones that are being used by the primary prow. That shouldn't be a huge blocker. I think we have scripts to just create projects and that sort of thing now. But in terms of migrating like the prow.k8s.io, I think there hasn't been as much focus on hashing that plan out currently because it's blocked on all of the resources that are being used in the CI, depending on using google.com credentials to access other legacy infrastructure like CI, GCS buckets, for example. And until we finish migrating those things, I don't know if we can safely like wind down and fully migrate that instance, which is, I think, quite a bit of CI is still depending on these things.
Okay, can we point me to the script you need for the staging instance? So that's create the project. I'm not sure to understand.
Yeah, so in k8s.io, all of the like resource management is automated, and we have scripts for all the GCP resources. I can point you to more of that, but it looks like Aaron has had a comment for a bit.
Well, so, I mean, sorry, I know I feel bad because like I don't know if I'm the blocker here, but your lack of connection with somebody who both has prow expertise and also the privileges to stand stuff up in K8s infra is blocking you. But I'm kind of, I don't know if I agree with Ben's suggestion of like standing up parallel staging clusters or parallel staging build clusters and hooking it up to that. Maybe I just man, as far as I'm aware, things start to get really tricky when we have multiple instances of prow attempting to manage the same repo or attempting to schedule jobs to the same build cluster. And so I feel like we have work to do in investigating like what the technical blockers are there. But I guess I hear you saying that you're blocked from doing that investigation because you can't stand up your own instance of prow.
Well, can we step back a little bit further? What is the goal of this staging cluster? Because depending on that,
the goal is basically see how we can migrate the current pro instance to the community infra.
Okay. Honestly, I think given how many issues prow has with sharing resources and so on, and how much state is in the cluster, I'm kind of suspecting that what we're going to wind up doing is once we finish getting all of the sort of non-prow dependencies migrated, like the Bosco's pool, the GCS buckets, to be CNCF based, then I think we're going to need to have a day where we just kind of spin down the old one and spin up the new one with the same config, but different clusters. Or like maybe stop scheduling jobs and like copy over the custom resources with all the data about what jobs we've been running or something like that. Just because besides the can't schedule together, you have things like jobs that are only supposed to run so frequently, like scale testing. And they're just, I don't think there is a good way to trivially shift these things. As Aaron mentioned, there's prow's not really built to have multiple running against a repo. I think there'd be quite a bit of work to make that happen, I suspect. I think the most viable option may just be a hard cutover. and have not actually having a staging one running against anything. But if we think that we should stage it, I think we need to stand up totally parallel infra because and just like migrate everything over to it. I don't think we can share repos or build clusters without a lot of work.
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
I chime in a little bit because I'm currently in the process of having kubeflow migrating from KSPRO to another pro. And the thing I observed is it's possible to use the same build cluster, but the cutoff time should be very well aligned, because what we can do is there's a deny list. So basically the most concerning part is Syncer. Syncer would come over and delete pods that doesn't belong to this pro. So once you have two pro managing the same build cluster, they will start to delete pods from the other pro. And they will keep on failing jobs on the other pro. So there is a deny list in Syncer where you can say, I don't want to delete things from this build cluster. That we can configure on the cutoff day on KSPRO. Say we don't want to manage this build cluster at this point, and we can migrate on the to the other pro on that day. And yeah, that's pretty much what we can do. If you do want to set up a separate build cluster, that's what Kubeflow team decided to do. You can just start priming the build cluster on the new pro. Because sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, so basically what you can do is you can set up a bunch of pro jobs that are optional, not reporting on the other pro instance, and they can start to managing the other pro can start to managing the repo, but they are not going to cause any noise. And once you feel comfortable with the new build cluster, you can start migrating to the new build cluster without deny list anything. You can just do the transition even without downtime. We have documented a bunch of stuff on the issue. If you're interested, I can point you to that issue.
Aaron?
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I think Chao's a great person to talk to. I guess like my short version is, I think this requires a little bit more of a working session to sort of figure out the plan. But I think what we can, we could start with maybe is you get Prow set up, and you get a staging Prow set up, and we point it at like its own GCS bucket for logs and stuff like that. And then we could hook it up to like either a single repo within Kubernetes or Kubernetes SIGs, or like we could even try hooking it up to a separate org, just so we know like we have a Prow cluster up and running. I still personally would really like to see work put into Syncer and maybe trigger so that we could have Prow apply a label to the jobs to say like which Prow instance scheduled this job, so that Syncer could then go through and only delete the Prow jobs that it created or something like that. I mean, like maybe the deny list logic of doing it by job name is a good start. But yeah, I would like try to set it up, see if we could get webhooks from Kate's, but be very, very quiet in terms of which plugins and stuff we turn on. Like experiment with a single repo to figure out what multiple Prows trying to do that, or migrating plugins from one Prow instance to another looks like.
Open question around that. Are we able to make Prow restrict a build cluster's usage to a namespace? I know you can set a namespace when using a build cluster. I don't know if Prow jobs can still like set the namespace on the pod. If they can't, then couldn't we just make Syncer only pay attention to like test pod for one prow and like test pods 2 for another prow?
The problem is, so first, no, it's not possible to have one POW instance with multiple namespaces. It's one global setting, the namespace in which you create the pods. And the problem is that Thinker has logic to delete all pods that were created by POW and do not have an associated POW job anymore. And the created by POW is determined via a binary label created by POW equals 2 or something like that. It will just delete everything there. That's the part Chao was referring to before, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think
Can we just globally set the new prow to use a non-default namespace like testpods 2 or something?
Yes.
Or will Syncer still try to delete things across namespaces?
No. It will just.
So if we were willing to alter the namespace, which in theory shouldn't affect our jobs for the like prow 2, then we could share a build cluster.
Maybe.
It will affect them insofar as that the jobs expect a set of secrets to be there. If you copy them all over, I believe it should just work.
I think it would also affect things that are not using fully qualified access to in-cluster services, but I believe the only in-cluster services we're using today are Boscos and the build cache, and I think we switched those to fully qualified to reduce DNS load anyhow.
I feel like there's a path forward to muddle through this, and Arnaud, as much as I want to like work with you directly to help figure out what that path is, I just don't have the time for the next couple of days, certainly. How could we help you move forward? Like, I know the thing I had blocked you on before was like setting up a GCS bucket for the staging prow instance to log to. I could do that. So we could start getting like a prow instance that's stood up, maybe even without a build cluster to start with, just so you can make sure you get that running in the K10 cluster.
Okay, I think if we agree to use a different namespace for the pro staging instance, we can basically set up basically the staging instance and having a periodic job running in a different namespace in the build cluster.
Sure, let's give that a shot.
Yeah,
I felt like there were deeper implications with Planck and some of the other prow components, but yeah, we might be able to avoid that entirely by using a separate namespace.
Okay.
Sorry for taking us long on that, but I know you've been asking repeatedly, Arnaud, so thanks for sticking with us.
Okay, I just want to clarify. Basically, the idea about this was just to define a transition plan without cutting the traffic of pro.gates.io. I mean, that's the ultimate goal. If at some point this year or next year, we want to shift the pro instance, we want to identify what's the blocker we're doing without cut the traffic.
Yeah, well, that's where I totally want to do it this year. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for everything.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. We went a bit over time, but I think this was a very productive meeting today. I'll follow up with everyone and Slack and so on about what we do.
I heart you all for staying long. Me and my kittens, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Aaron.
Cheers.
Have a good one, everyone.
Later.
Thank you. Bye.